But we changed microphone stuff this afternoon, so we'll see what happens. It's still a little loud, maybe. So we're going to see what happens if it starts crackling again. I'm just going to throw it at Terry over. Somebody who said that. If you would please take your Bibles and go back with me to 1 John chapter 4, okay? Do you believe every single thing that you hear? No. I would hope not, right? I would hope that we do not. I would hope that we walk through and we think about things. And I want you to think about this. Here in 1 John chapter 4, verse 1, he's writing to us about something here that's very, very important. He says, beloved. Now remember, that's a term of endearment here. He loves us. He cares about his audience. It says, do not be deceived. Every spirit tests the spirits. Yeah, I don't think it's going to work. We're just going to switch. But that helps us to narrow down what's wrong with it, huh? What do you think? So as you can see here, he reminds us that this is every spirit, but test the spirits. You know, it's funny how as kids, we want our kids to know the truth. We want our kids to understand the truth. And when we go about here to test the spirits, it can be tricky sometimes. Does the devil know the Bible? He does. But he doesn't always tell it to us in the form of truths. He tells it to us in half lies, which are what? Simply lies. He wants us to believe his lies. He wants us to be able to be led astray. So as we see this here, he says, you and I, children, beloved, those whom I love dearly. He says, test the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. It's interesting is that as you think about false prophet, it's anyone who goes about and they're trying to get us to believe that message that they're given. They're going about trying to give not a message of God, but a message of their own. They're trying to get us to believe that which is not the truth. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people, both inside of the church and outside of the church, who can very easily be led astray by the false teachings of false teachers, simply because we don't take enough time to know the truth of the true teacher. And here, I want us to see here that he says, pay attention to this. Now, verse 2, he says, by this you know the Spirit of God. It says, every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God. When I was in seminary, I took a class on spiritual warfare. Have you guys ever studied spiritual warfare before? It's quite interesting. It's actually, if you want to know the absolute truth, spiritual warfare is actually quite scary. It's actually quite eye-opening and revealing because so many times we don't think about just how real it is. There's a series of books out. They've been out for probably 30 or more years. And I know you guys heard me talk about them before, but if you ever get a chance to read Frank Peretti's books, Frank Peretti wrote some books very clearly about spiritual warfare. Now, that's not what they're called. They're called Piercing the Darkness, This Present Darkness, and I believe the third one's The Oath. And they're all about the idea of how spiritual warfare takes place, how Satan gets into your mind, he gets into my mind, how he goes through us to try to get us to doubt and to fear and other things. And so, but the whole point of that book is, it's interesting, there's this a vivid scene. They make a lot of movies, don't they? And most of the movies, I'll just be perfectly honest with you, I have no desire to see whatsoever. Okay? Except for going to the movie theater down at stop 11 or so there off of Madison. So they've got recliners in the auditorium. But other than that, I really don't care about going to see them. But the thing is, what I want us to understand here is that if they ever made a movie about the books Frank Peretti wrote, and they really, truly took those movies and made them to character of the books that are written, it would literally scare the living daylights out of somebody. I never thought about some of the, I say graphic details, but not in a nasty way, but just the idea of when someone is not praying, how fear can come in and just destroy our life. Right? So we need to test the spirits. We need to know what they're of God. If you notice here, there's one way to be able to do this. He said, if that spirit does not confess that Jesus Christ has come into the flesh, they're not the right spirit. They're not the right spirit. Verse 3, and every spirit that does not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and is now already in the world. So please understand something. I want you to notice how that was written. The spirit of the Antichrist. I want us to see here that we always talk about the end times, right? It's probably one of the biggest sellers of books that's out there. There's all kinds of those guys. Haiti does a series of more. In fact, not just a series. This is pretty much what he is doing. He does the end times, and you have David Jeremiah, and you have many others that do those things. And there's nothing wrong with studying end times and understanding and knowing the end times. But guys, it is foolishness on our part to believe that the Antichrist is only going to come, and the end is only going to come, way down the road. Because if you notice here, what does it say about the Antichrist? Already here. Already here. And the Antichrist spirit is just that Antichrist. Okay? Can he fool people? Yes. Can he get you and I to believe his lies if we're not careful? And he's really good at his job. And so here, John wants us to see here that we need to remember that the spirit must confess who Jesus Christ is, and that spirit, he's already been there. He is out there. He is trying to make things terrible. Any person who goes out there and denies who Jesus Christ is. And listen, there are people out there who have tried to deny the deity of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was, and will only be the only deity, the only perfect person ever walked the face of the earth. He was part of the deity, wasn't he? So he's the only one that denied who he is. And they're trying to get us to believe that. Now, verse 4 says, you are of God, little children. Now remember, he opened up by reminding us that we are loved, reminding us that he cares about us, reminding us that we are important when he calls us beloved. And now here he says in verse 4, little children. I was just over next door before church started tonight, and I was talking with Miss Bev and Miss Drew back there. We were just kind of talking about how terminologies have changed. You can't use certain words, that we used 15 years ago, even 5 years ago. And one of the things here that you can see is that the terminologies here, today, if we call somebody a little child, people are going to get offended. Did you know that? Youth is the most interesting thing, because when I was a kid, a youth was still a youth. There was a youth, and we didn't think anything about it in Sunday calls. Hey, children, get over here. We just did. I didn't think anything about it. But wait, today you do it, you thought that the world stops spinning if you don't use the right words. Okay? And so here we see him, he said, little children. And I want you to know why he's using that terminology. Number one, because little children have to be taught. Okay, more than you and I as adults need to be. We need to continually to be taught, but little children consistently need to have direction and instruction in their lives. And so as we go through this and look at this, you're going to see it says, you are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. How many times have we seen, we've seen that? We sang that song, right? Over and over again over the years, we've been saying that. And what he's really talking about here, we got to understand this, is that he is talking about these false teachers that are out there, these skeptics, these ones who are trying to say Christ is not divine, that Christ is not who he says that he claims to be. He says God is bigger and stronger and better than any of them. Okay? And this is what he is saying to us right there, that he who is in the world. You see, it's very interesting to me that as a Christian, one of the things that I was taught a long time ago is I am supposed to strive not to be like the world. Now, I wish I could say that, boy, every day I'm exactly what I'm supposed to be. But in reality, we know that's not the case, right? But to see, one of the things here that he wants us to understand is that the one who is in this world is pales in comparison to the one who lives in you, to the one who you're supposed to be serving, to the one who does all these great things in this world. I think of all the miracles in the Bible. Okay? Did Satan do miracles in the Bible? Yes, he did. He did. Okay? He did some interesting things. But the reality is who did miracles that really changed people's lives? Christ did. Remember the end times, those destroyers in the book of Revelation, they're going to be raised back to life. And Satan's going to bring back to life the different beasts and everything else for people to worship. Never for the positive, but for the negative. Christ always did something. I want you to think about the Christ who walked on water. Does he live in you? The Christ that raised people from the dead, doesn't he live in us? The Christ that changed the water into wine, doesn't he live in us? The Christ that took the bread and he blessed it, and the fish and he blessed it, and there were leftovers, isn't he the one who lives in us? The truth of who he is lives in you and lives in me. And John wants us to be reminded, know the truth. Know the Spirit. Know who God is. He is a good thing. I've heard people say over the years, I don't know if I want to be a Christian. You know, because God puts a lot of different rules and regulations on us, right? Or if I go to church, and then, you know, we got to act differently when we go to church. And, you know, what's very interesting is that I have found that in society today, one of the greatest tragedies is that we think kids are stupid. Okay? Kids are not stupid. Kids are extremely smart. And people who say that kids are not smart don't have never been around them in their life. Okay? They're extremely intelligent, extremely smart. And he here is reminding them, you are that way, but you know what? You're smart. You can do this, Christian. We can walk through this. We can see this spirit that is there. The Antichrist is out there. Now, should we panic that the Antichrist is out there? No. Why? Because he who lives within us is greater than he who is in the world. Okay, we don't have to worry about that. We're okay. Now, verse 5. They are of the world. Okay, they are of the world. Now, he's talking about, again, those teachers, those false prophets, those ones who denying who Jesus Christ is, denying his power, denying everything about him. They are the ones who are in the world. Therefore, they speak as of the world, and the world hears them. You see, the moment that the church becomes friends with the world, the moment the church loses its witness. Okay? People might say, well, that's not fair to say. Sure it is, because you're not supposed to be friends of the world. And if you notice what it says right here, he says the world is important to the world, and the world is important to people who think it is about everything else. Do we live in this world? Yes, we do. By the way, we're not always going to live in this world. We're not always going to be here. We're going to be spending eternity with Jesus Christ. So here he is saying that because he is greater that lives in us and he was in the world, therefore they can only speak of the world. Why? Because that's all they know. That's all they know. It's very interesting how we listen to people who dabble in the world and who are completely in the world. They dabble just a little bit in the church. Okay? It's interesting how we do those things in our culture today. Because we have what we have done with the church, or we're trying to do with the church culturally, is we're trying to make the church to be politically correct. So I saw two disturbing stories this afternoon. Two of them. One was in Pakistan, and one, I believe it was England. And the one in France. It wasn't England, it was in France. A young lady made some comments about Muslims on Facebook or Twitter or one of those things, and she is potentially threatening now to have to go to jail because she offended the Muslims, and that's against the law, and you can't do that. And then in Pakistan, they're forcing, I believe it's a 14-year-old Christian girl, to marry a Muslim man. She has to convert to Islam. Okay? Guys, do you think that he who is in the world is pretty strong? You better believe he is. But he who is in you and I is greater and bigger and stronger than he who is in this world. And you and I have him living in us. So we need to remember that. Verse 6, we are of God. He who knows God hears us. He who is not of God does not hear us. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. Now, one of the things about the truth that sometimes, we say the truth is hard to swallow, right? I'll be honest with you, when I read my Bible, it's not really that hard to swallow. Because the only real truth in this world is found where? In the Bible. Listen, the reality is that in our world today, we have this whole idea that we speaking the truth is a bad thing. Speaking the truth hurts people's feelings. Well, the reality is that we know by the truth, we know by who we hear, what we do, how we react, how we live. By this we know the spirit of truth. And who's the spirit of truth? The Holy Spirit comes down. He's the spirit of truth. It's part of that Trinity. It's part of that deity. He is divine. He is that third part. that part that we talked a little bit about last Wednesday night, right? Okay, so please remember this. He says, you have this spirit that's there. Now, have you ever find yourself saying, I love something or I love someone? I know that I think Brother Rex has said many times when we're thinking that we love you. Right? How many times do we forget how much we're supposed to love God? Right? Not just when things are going good, but also when things are not so good, we're supposed to love Him the same. Well, listen to what happens here. It says, verse 7, it says, Beloved, let us love one another. That can be a big task, right? I want you to imagine for a moment, if you can, I don't know if it's possible, that you are an Iraqi Christian. And you're in Iraq or even Afghanistan or Pakistan or other places around the world that has the oppression of Islam. And I think of Iraq because I think of this. I think of people whose family were destroyed, people who lost everything that they had. And the Bible here says they're still supposed to love the one who did it to them. Hard task, wouldn't you agree? Hard task. In fact, I don't know if I would have acted any differently. I probably went out in the streets and celebrated when that person was gone. But you see, he says here that if we love one another, one of the things too, Christians, we have to understand is that if we only love one another, we're missing out on a lot. Okay? Love, your love and my love, and the love of the church, will determine what we do and what we do or do not do. Okay? And here we see him. Let us love one another. Why? For love is of who? God. Love is of God. I want you to write this word down for me. Hate. Okay? Hate. I've said many times in the past that probably one of the dirtiest words in the English language is change. Nobody likes the word change. Try to get a 3-year-old to change their underwear, right? They just run and disappear. They don't like it. What do you mean, Daddy? I wore this shirt 3 days. It's not dirty. I don't want to change it, right? We don't like change. But I'm going to tell you something that's even more, to me, it's even more interesting. The word that we should hate more than anything else is hate. You know how many times we say we hate something? I want you to do this sometime. Just like we don't truly understand how much God loves us because our mind won't allow us to do so. Just like we can't understand how great God's mercy is and how great God's grace is towards us. Guys, we barely scratch the surface when we use the word hate and what that word really means. Okay? But so many times, though, it flies out of our mouth so quickly that we don't even think how serious that word really is. And here we see him saying this, Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God. Hate in your life, hate in my life, hate in the life of the church has absolutely no place. Hate is an utter detestable, not even a dislike. It's so horrible of something that it's something that we should never take lightly when we say. We should say that we hate Satan. We really should. Why? Because the Bible tells us that's the truth. But hating Satan means we'll do nothing ever to try to please him. We'll do nothing ever to try to let him to convince us to be somebody or do something that we're not. We need to understand is that hate is what we need to have towards the devil, not towards the person the devil has convinced that they're doing right. Hate is extremely, extremely strong word that we really just barely scratch the surface on when we use it. And so we as Christians, we don't need to have that word in our churches and in our vocabulary. It says, because verse 7 says, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Now, one other thing here we have to understand here is that this is, somebody can say, well, right there it's proof I'm a Christian because I love my boyfriend. Or I love my dog. Or I love my house. Well, it didn't just say that. It says, listen, everyone who loves. And listen, I know many non-Christians who love. But that's not what he's talking about, is it? But we can interpret that way, Brother Jim, if we're not careful, can't we? If we don't know the scriptures as a whole, we don't understand who God is. So what exactly then is he talking about here? He wants us to understand here that this is a holy, unconditional, passionate, sacrificial love for God that we have, and we respond out of love to God because of it. Okay, I'm going to do that one more time. It is a passionate, unconditional, sacrificial love that we have for one another, but more importantly, for God. And it is the testimony of the love that we have for God, that people see it through us. Okay? See, that's something we need to remember. The world loves, but it's temporary. And here, you and I as Christians, you and I, we as a church, we need to make sure that we have an unconditional, passionate, sacrificial love for God, and it'll show in our service to Him. The world is not going to give that. They're not going to do it. But this is what He wants from you and me. Verse 8 says, he who does not love does not know God, for God is love. Now, we must understand something. That the root of love is found in God. Okay, that's where it's buried. That's where it all grows from. That's where it all stems from. And so many times we have this perverted notion of love. Have you guys seen that? Today we've got love is whatever love is, what love is, and I can love whatever I want to and whomever I want to. That's how we define love, by emotions in our world, don't we? That's what we do by emotions, how we feel about something. And here we have to remember, he says that he who does not love does not know God, for God is love. And we need to grasp and understand that he is to be that important to us. And we have to understand that because the origin of love is found in Jesus Christ Himself, not in this world. And if we can't love God, I've heard people say this before, and I have said this before. The Bible tells us, how can we say we love God whom we have not seen, and say we hate our brother who we have? I believe I got it right, Jim. Okay? Think about that for a moment. He's basically saying you can't. You see, we as Christians, let us never forget this love that we're supposed to have, this unconditional, passionate, sacrificial love that we need to have for God, who is the originator. He is the originator of that love for us. He is the one who gives us that love. He is the only one who can produce that love in your life and in my life. He's the only one that can produce that love. How many times have you gone downtown and you see all the people living under the bridges? Right? When I was driving around the other day and I was trying to tell Rachel as she was learning to drive, I said, "Hon, one of the things you need to remember is I may not necessarily remember the names of the streets, but I know they go north and south, east or west. And I know that we live south of where we want to go." I said, "So I'm going to take you down this street right here and I want you to tell me how to get home." She goes, "No, I can't do that." I said, "Well, I can make you drive and I can sit over there and you can try to figure it out your own." "No, don't do that either." And it's very interesting is that and you know where we were? We're on 465. And I pulled off on Washington Street, East Washington Street. I said, "Come on, let's go." I said, "Yes, it's a scary neighborhood. We can't go through life thinking everything's scary, guys. Just a little point that out to you, okay?" But the reality is I said, "Now get us home." I said, "You know where downtown is?" I said, "Don't worry, I'll get us home." And I said, "We're just going to go that way." I said, "Washington Street goes right down, just south, just a couple of blocks from downtown, exactly from smack downtown. So we can figure out where we're at from there, right?" "I think so." No, we can figure it out. And as Christians, and by the way, we did get home. We didn't get lost, okay? She decided she got brave enough to drive on South 31 there. She said, "I know how to get home from here." Okay, I said, "Good, then turn right." "What?" See, I do that to him a lot. It's fun. You see, one of the things we have to understand here is that he says, you know what? This love that we're supposed to have, it comes from God. And it produces this. It doesn't take us down weird paths to get to it. God says, "I love you." He doesn't say, "Go down Washington Street, turn wherever you think you're going to be able to get to me." I'm easily found. Easily found. But guys, you know what? I can't get home. You can't get home without knowing how to get home. You have to know when to turn left or when to turn right or all those things. You have to know how to do that. And here what God is wanting us to understand, that if we can't don't love each other, there's a problem. And we need to remember that love starts with him. Verse 10 says this, in this love, not that we loved God, but he loved us. I wish it said right there too that he loved us first. Because he loved us first, didn't he? Loved us first. Okay? Loved us and sent his son to be the propitiation for our sins. He sent his son to be the atoning sacrifice for you and for me. That's what that word propitiation means, okay? That he sent his son to be the sacrifice that you and I needed because we needed our sins forgiven of. I've shared with you before, I'm glad I was an Old Testament priest because it would have been a long day of my service for me. You see, the thing is here is that propitiation, this gift that he has given to us, it is because of his love that he has for us. Now, verse 11 says this, beloved, there's that word again, beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. First of all, you can write this down. Christian, we cannot love each other on our own strength, with our own strength. Okay? We can't. We really don't know how. But God can show us how, and God will lead us to do so. This is what John is getting at here. He says, beloved, remember that's an important word, an endearing term, something he's looking at us saying, you're important to me. If God so loved us. So first of all, you notice that there he says, if. It's a conditional phrase, it's conditional here. And he's saying here that if God, did God love us? John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Yes, he did. Yes, he does. And so now we see this with him. If God, so we also ought to love him. You see, God first loved us. And we need to remember that. We need to understand that as Christians, we have to love sometimes even those who are unlovable. Let's be honest, sometimes things can make us uneasy in life, can't they? I don't care if it's circumstances, whatever it might be. Generally, circumstances make us uneasy. If I was to say to you right now, guys, we're going to go downtown. In fact, we're going to just walk around all under the bridges and we're just going to give everybody a gospel tract tonight. How many of you say, I got something to do tonight? I don't know if I can do that. I'm not knocking anybody. I'm just saying because fear can set in so quickly and we can forget the importance of how much we're supposed to love and care for and all those things because we put ourselves ahead of the cart. And we forget that. And we think that we're the ones doing all this. And God says, no, I'm the one doing these things. And he wants us to be trusting him. He was the propitiation for you, for me, to every single person walking the face of this earth. He was the one who was the anointing sacrifice for us. And we are not capable of loving people without the help of God. Now remember, go back to my Iraqi illustration. How many people really truly thought, man, I love Saddam Hussein for all the things he did to my people. I love that he tortured all my Christian friends. It'd be hard to do, I'll admit it. It'd be tough to do. But does the Bible say we're supposed to do that? It sure does. But I want to point something else out. It also says God will give us the strength to do it. See, that's something to remember. We have this idea thinking, wait, I can do this on my own. No, we can't. My little puppy next door, every morning about 7 o'clock, she starts barking. That's okay with me. She slept all night. I got to sleep all night. 7 o'clock's not too early or too late. I was like, that works for me, especially when it's daylight outside. But guess what? No matter how hard she tries, she cannot open up the cage that she sleeps in. She can't do it. Not possible. But the moment that I lift up the blanket off the top of her cage and I move the slide over, she goes, I can get out now. And she gets out there, her tail just wiggles and she wants me to pet her. You see, in our Christian life, guys, we cannot love each other without the help and the guidance and the direction of God. And so, as we go through this and we look at this, he says, love is not that we loved him, love, and this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us. There's a lot of times I've thought in my life, would I love me the way God loves me? right? There's a song out there. One time maybe I have to play it for you next week. I don't know. It's called "The God Who Stays" by Matthew West. If you haven't heard it yet, you need to listen to it. Okay? There's a lot of truth found in that song. And you know what? It's true. Despite of everything that we've ever done or will do, God still loves us. And he says, you know what? I want you to love me back. But remember, we can't love each other without him helping us doing it. We can't do it. It's not possible. We can pretend, and trust me, we all do that. We can pretend a lot. We're good at that as people. That's how we're wired. But the fact is God says you can't do it that way. So verse 12 kind of ties into this. And you can write this down. Verses 12 through 16 have everything to do with seeing God through love. All right? Seeing God through love. No one has seen God at any time. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love has been perfected in us. You see, it's crucial for our church. It's crucial for the church down the street. It's crucial for the churches where Jennifer and the rest of the group is at in Ecuador. It's crucial for our literal survival to love each other. It's not about how much money we have in our checking account. It's not about how many hymns we sing on Sunday morning or don't sing on Sunday morning. It's not what translation of the Bible that we use. It is about whether or not we will love the way God wants us to. And the church, a long time ago, the church had problems. The Jews thought they were better than everybody else. They did. And in fact, Paul even wrote to them and talked to them in the book of Romans. He said, you all Jews think you got it figured out. You had the word and you still didn't believe it. You see, we need to remember this, that it is the most important thing you and I could ever do in our church. The most important thing we could ever do is to love one another. And why do we have to do that? Why do we need to do so? Because God says to do so. How many of us would rather be blessed than cursed, right? All of us want to be blessed, of course. Well, how is that going to happen? Well, we got to love God first and foremost. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy might. Right? And then the second part here is that he says to love one another. But by the way, we can't love one another the way we're supposed to without doing what first? Loving God. See, they go hand in hand. It's a domino effect. They all go hand in hand. And he says on here, literally says to us right there in verse 12, he says, no one has ever seen God at any time. If we love one another, God abides in us. So how does the world know whether or not we love God? How does the world know? It's by how we love one another. That's how remember, the world loves, doesn't it? It most certainly does. But the world's love is based upon the different standards than what the Word of God gives for you and for me and for the church. The world, I always think of the world standards as being, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. I got to get something out of it. And if I can't get anything out of it, I don't know if it's worth my time. But here we see him saying, you know what? God abides in us. And since he does, his love has perfected those things. This past Wednesday night, I believe it's Romans 8, chapter 12, or chapter 8, verse 12 or 15, one of those two, I don't remember right off the top of my head, but it says that we are not to have fear in our lives. How we live our life, how we serve God, how our church lives a life, and how our church serves God. Why? Because fear is a direct result of a lack of love of God. Because why? Because the Bible tells us that love casts out all fear. All right? So we've got to love him first because he's made perfect. Verse 13. By this we know that we abide in him and he in us because he gave us his spirit. You ever feel bad? And you say, that preacher just made me feel bad. Well, that Sunday school teacher, I can't believe he said that as they read the Bible to you. You ever been there? Right? You see, the whole idea here is to understand is that the Bible is there so that we can have the truth in our life. And by this, by our love for God, by our love for one another, it will show us and show the world that we love God. That's what it will show. Listen, we don't have to use words. Did you know that? It's interesting here. How many people get blown away when there's a good act, when somebody does an act of kindness? I can't believe they did that. What an act of kindness. There's a story, I don't remember where I saw it. I think it was here in Indiana, but I could be wrong. It talked about how this lady went in to get her car fixed and she couldn't believe that these people did it for nothing. For free. Parts, fixed it, everything. What an impact. And I can't remember if it was a church, I don't remember who was doing it. But what I'm saying here is that we have to make sure that we love one another, because people will see that love. They're going to say, why are you so different? In a good way, different. Why don't you act like, you mean you don't want anything in return for what you just did for me? You'd be surprised how many people over the years said, well, I want to give you some money for helping me do that. I said, if I want to do it for money, I'm not going to go and help you do it for money. You need help, right? That's what we need to do here. Now, verse 16, it says, and we have seen and testified that the Father has sent the Son as Savior of the world. Now, remember, we have the Spirit, the Father, and all the Son, everybody here, and that the world needs a Savior. How's the world going to see a Savior if we don't have words to say? I know this. I think Jennifer's biggest fear when she went to Ecuador was not going to Ecuador. It wasn't doing any of those things. The biggest fear, I believe, was that you couldn't communicate to someone who you couldn't speak the same language. I really think that was the biggest fear. It was more, not so much a fear. I think she's found out probably more so now as more of an obstacle that we make up in our head. Because the Bible talks about tongues. Did you know that we talked about this a little bit before? And you know what? There was an interpreter available. And that interpreter was able to take the words spoken by the missionary teams who didn't speak Spanish, could translate them and do the same thing from Spanish back to English. That's the purest definition, by the way, of an interpretation of tongue, just so you know. You see, we have to understand here is that he says that the Father has sent the Son to the world. Verse 15, whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him and he in God. But remember something here now. Everything that I just read to you doesn't nullify that if somebody who claims to be a Christian lives like the world, acts like the world, it doesn't say that they're a Christian. That verse doesn't mean that. Because you see, above, Brother Jim, above it said, you're going to love, and here's how you're going to do so. And if you call yourself a Christian and you can't love, guess what? The Bible says what? You're not. It literally says you are not. Okay, so what is he getting at here? He is reminding us here, he says, you know what? This is what it is. We have to confess who? It's key. Confessing not the Pope, not the President of the Southern Baptist Convention, but who? Jesus Christ. Professing him. People will see him. People will know him, who he is, through how you and I live our lives. And the last verse for tonight, verse 16 says this. And we have known and believed the love that God has for us. Do you know the greatest testimony ever that you and I could give, I don't care what it is how something changed our life? Okay? You ever buy something at the bottom that says the testimonial of people who bought it? Some of those things are fake, by the way, okay? But the thing is, you know what? If God changed your life, you don't have to, you may have to tell people how he changed their life, but generally they're going to see how he changed your life. They're going to see it through the way you live, the way I live, the way the church lives. They're going to see it because it's going to be the opposite of what the world is. Why? Because it's a different type of love. It's not a selfish love, it's a giving love. A love that is there that the world desperately needs to see. And then in verse 16, it says the love of God has for us. God is love. We've seen that many times. But here I want us to understand something about what the world has done. I know that the world has taken, as I shared with you this morning, the world has taken the rainbow and they've turned it into a perverted idol. Okay? But Christian, listen, it was never designed as a perverted item. Don't be afraid to explain to people what it was. Okay? It wasn't meant that God is love. No, in fact, it showed the fact that God had just judged and he's not going to judge anymore because of that rainbow. But I want you to see here that God is love. But what love doesn't do, love doesn't overlook behavior that's not acceptable. Okay, I love my kids. But I'm not going to say, you know what, just keep running in Southport Road. It's okay. It's not a big deal. Or go play on I-65. I love you, and I'm not going to discipline you. I love you. I'm not going to tell you no. I love you too much, so just go play. That's not how God works, is it? No, God says, I love you too much to let you do those things that are contrary to who I am. I love you too much. I want to have a relationship with you because I love you, because I want a relationship with you. I'm sending my son. I sent my son, Jesus, for you. That's how much he loves us. And let us never forget that. And he who abides in love abides in God, and God in him. It's interesting how, as I shared with you this morning, as elections are coming up, how many people love to invoke the name of God. It's amazing how many people will invoke the name of God, all for the sake of you or me voting for it. But yet, I can question a lot of some of their how much they actually love God. And some might say that's judgmental. That's not what it says right here. It says right here, we're going to give ourselves away in how we live our life. And if a person is spewing out hate, and then say, I love Jesus Christ, but I hate you, there's a problem. Isn't that what it just said? So tonight, I just want you to think about it. Let people see God through you and through me and through his church by the love that we have for him first and then for one another. Brother Donnie, would you